As soon as I heard about your documentary, I was extremely fascinated by it, and I can only imagine the experiences and the stories that you have here. So, first and foremost, a binational baseball team playing in America, playing in Mexico. How does this all come together in terms of telling this in a documentary style?
Sure. Well, my impetus for looking at this team was the dissonance of what my understanding was of life on the border from what was being said politically at the time in the context of the 2016 election and the call for building a wall. And also, some of the rhetoric that was coming out of that, particularly from the president, was that were the kind of telling the story of immigration as this invasion of Mexicans who were, to quote the president, rapists and drug dealers. And what I knew, what was going on from my reporting was very different than that, that most of the people who were trying to come into the US were families and children trying to escape horrible violence in Central America. That story has been told. So what I wanted to do was show people in a way that I thought would be relatable what life is like there on the border and how interconnected the two sides of the Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo, depending on which side you're from, what life is like on those two sides and how connected the two are. So I was reading a New Yorker article about a musician, actually it was a profile of a musician about 2 years ago. And the musician grew up and was of the border on the U.S. side from Texas. And in the piece, they mentioned the reporter and the musician went to a Tecos game just as they had started playing on both sides. It was just a sentence or two in the article, but for me, it was a great potential subject of a documentary about the border to kind of show how fluid and connected that both sides of the border are. So I reached out to the team, and they were immediately down for us to film. And it was a great entry point to kind of explore all the issues that I was talking about.
It's amazing how two sentences in an article has led to all of this, and I'm sure so many incredible experiences. So once you got down there in Texas and in Mexico, what were some of the most fascinating things that you and the team discovered?
Well, I mean, the thing that struck me, to be honest, was initially in Laredo, Texas, how pervasive Spanish is spoken. I fortunately speak Spanish, and just going to the McDonald's or checking in a hotel, you speak Spanish. To me, that was very telling, again, to show how connected both sides of the border are. Similarly, the fact that baseball is played and played quite well and has a huge fan base in Mexico, that was something that I didn't initially know. So that was pretty interesting. And then, just traveling with the baseball team, politics and kind of big picture aside, it's a real hard sport to participate and play in. In the majors, it's 162 games. The Mexican League, they play over 120 games. And man, this is a grind. These guys are playing pretty much every day with one break a week, sometimes twice a day, rarely, but once in a while. They're traveling long distances by bus across Mexico. And then these poor guys had to often cross the border at the end of a long journey, which could be a long line depending on what the situation was at the border at the time. So just kind of the day-to-day nuts and bolts grind of being on a baseball team, and then add on that the complications and the uniqueness of being on a binational baseball team. And it was really pretty fascinating to see.
There's so many different layers to this. I mean, just the grind of baseball, like you said, but it's one thing if you're going from America to Mexico, there can be a little time lag. But when you're trying to go from Mexico coming back into America after a long doubleheader or something like that, I can only imagine just how frustrating it was for some of these guys. So what was it like just starting to get to know some of these players personally and learning about their lives and just dealing with some of these situations here?
So the players themselves were really great and open to the idea. And I should mention that, even though my film has kind of an overarching political message, the players themselves were not overtly political or even covertly political in any way. They're baseball players and they're living their lives, and a lot of them are trying to make it to the majors and grinding it out. And some of them were in the majors or are now kind of finishing their careers, and this is their job. So there wasn't a whole lot of political discussions, but inherently, what made the team fascinating is you had players from the U.S. Who were Anglo-American players. You had Mexican-American players who had a different perspective. And then you had Mexican players, and then some Dominicans and Cubans and people from everywhere else. So to kind of see the way the team came together and the dynamic within the team, because you have different languages and different perspectives, kind of seeing how that developed over time was really pretty fascinating. One of the players that we spent the most time with, and who's kind of the star of the film, is a guy named Juan Martinez, who lives in Bakersfield, California. His parents both came to the U.S. illegally. His mom is now a citizen. His father was hoping to get citizenship this year, but because of COVID, everything is kind of backlogged. And this guy is Juan Martinez. He's Mexican American. He is kind of like the ambassador or go-between between the Anglo or non-speaking U.S.-based players and the Mexican players. And he had a really interesting perspective also because he grew up in the U.S. And so when we were traveling around Mexico with him, while he felt cultural connections and it wasn't entirely foreign for him, growing up in the U.S., his perspective was very different. And so a lot of times you could see his eyes light up at something that was very familiar from home, whether it was a food or language, and also his excitement in introducing part of his culture to some of the players who were not from Mexico. So that there's some fun moments there where he brings some players out to a market in Oaxaca where they eat grasshoppers, which is local cuisine. And Juan loves to eat. He's just kind of grabbing every food in a place where there's really good food, every little bite he can grab. So there's really kind of fun moments seeing this cultural exchange. And that's what we wanted to show in the film, is how connected we all can be.
I think that's a great point right there. And this film just hits on so many different things that are universally appealing to people, whether they live in America, whether they live in Mexico, it doesn't really matter. And I feel like that's always kind of been the goal with your work, whether it's this film, Dirty Money, working with Dan Rather, like you always want to have a bigger message here. So what's most important when people check this out?
I really want people to kind of, without any kind of, put their politics aside and come and watch a movie that I hope is entertaining and fun to watch, and let it wash over them. Don't bring in your hangups, wherever they come from, whatever side in the political spectrum you're from. We're so divided right now, and what I wanted to do is not shout in someone's face and tell them what to think, like is happening so much on cable news these days. What I wanted to do is tell a story and really just bring people to this place, and along with this really kind of fun and dynamic team, so they could experience it along, and then let their minds be made up after that. But this is not meant to change minds. It's really meant to kind of give people a visceral and immersive experience of life on the border with this very unique baseball team that is made up of people from all over the both sides of the border.
I feel like the best thing you can do is just let the camera roll and let the story unfold. And I think that's going to happen here. So Andrew, really nice to meet you, man. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you down the road, right?
Thanks for your interest. Appreciate it.